myself.
Perfect. And
hi, Amy, it's Carrie and Larry.
Hi, Carrie. I know.
See you
Kisses,
too.
hugs.
I bought Larry for a Hanukkah present. I bought the book for him. So he's read it, but I haven't had a chance to read it because I've been reading all these books on diversity and stuff.
Yeah. Good.
so before we get started, just a little kind of lay of the land. Feel free to put questions in the chat and it'll help us. And also feel free to use your raising your hand. And sometimes if we miss, you can just unmute and just, say I have a question, but we'll open up, of course, the space for questions. And we are filming. It's pinned on myself and Amy. So you won't be filmed, but your voice will be heard. So just kind of, the disclosure there. So if you don't want your voice to be heard, or so forth, feel free to put the question in the chat box. And Jamila, you're asking me a question. Are you hearing me? Yeah? Okay. Okay. Jamila, can you hear us? Yeah? Okay. Is she on? You can hear us? No? Did she get off and on? That's the magic trick these days. Okay, so first, just gratitude. Welcome, everyone. Huge gratitude. And thank you. Huge gratitude to Amy and to Larry, who gave the little nudge to kind of get the wheels going for the conversation tonight. And we've had such an honor, Amy, to have you come to Beloved. I'm thinking 3-4 times.
Probably. It feels as that it's been as many as that.
Yeah, every year with the annual conference, you come and you
Psychotherapy networker. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you share your wisdom with us on varying aspects of yoga therapy and mental well-being and mental health, and just acknowledge you as a pioneer and also blending these two in the yoga therapy and the yoga world and bringing it out with accessibility. So thank you for that. And how exciting to have a really creative conversation this evening, and where I got to realize there's a whole other side to Amy, and there's a profound creative writer within. And you mentioned how you read it in a couple days, and that was exactly my experience. I got it and I just was like, it was so beautifully done. So I wanted to just open up. I have some questions and I'd love to ask you some questions just to initiate the conversation, and then open it up for questions. And I think, Amy, you're open, right?
Absolutely.
To bring it on. But first I want to just kind of give you a space. If there's any way you want to ground or open the evening, I welcome you.
Thank you. I think that between polyvagal theory and the life force yoga I've been teaching for many years, that what we know is bringing our hands to the heart. We can use Eagle Mudra, is so soothing, and it connects us. It brings us into our parasympathetic. And certainly, as someone who's going to be answering the questions, I want to be with you, present from a parasympathetic side of my autonomic nervous system. So this is as much for me as it is for you. So let's place our hands in Eagle Mudra on the heart. And if it's comfortable for you, allow your eyes to close or soften. And just take a moment to feel the heartbeat. Feel the breath. Perhaps welcome the breath as it moves. moves your chest to meet your hands. Feel perhaps the coolness or the warmth of your hands. And let's bring an intention to be compassionate. Allow this hour that we spend together to be about your own self-care, not just about information, knowledge, but also how can it serve your heart? Maybe there's an intention there or a prayer. How can what we do this evening serve your heart? And if nothing arises immediately, just leave the space open so that your heart's will aligns with the heart and the will of the benevolent universe, of the divine, as you know the divine. And let's chant Yam, vibrating the heart with the long sound of Y and the soothing sound of Inhale for sound. Yam. And again, vibrating, feeling the resonance in your heart. Awakening that self-acceptance, that compassion. Yam. Hari Om, Shanti, peace, Shalom, Salam, peace. Namaste, everyone.
Namaste. Welcome. Thank you for that. That was actually beautifully grounding and necessary. So good. So I want to ask a couple questions, and some of them they're a little. One of them is intense, and I want to just kind of dive in. You up for that, Amy? Dive right in.
Start with the most intense.
Start with the, can only get lighter from there. But I ended up. I found there was a very strong, the layers around femininity, stories of women. It was all kind of woven, and I had recommended this book to specific women that were going through some pretty intense situations in their life. And the opening scene with Wendy and her husband and the mirror and the bathtub, it was so startling that some of them they had to, it was triggering, and they had to face themselves. And knowing you and your wisdom, I knew you knew that as a writer, of that kind of putting that in right at the beginning to set a tone or whatever that is. But I wanted to kind of hear your reason for that.
Well, the book thematically, it has at its core is, I think, the sacred feminine and sacred sexuality in the Indian culture and also in contemporary culture, and the repression of that and the shame that arises when we are repressed. And I think shame is a very challenging, difficult emotion. And in fact, what we did when we started with the Yam is a way of moving through the shame. And so the book really has moments of ecstasy and through dance and art and love. But it also looks at the places where women in particular are extremely vulnerable And our sexuality is both a gift, and also it is something that, because of the repression of female sexuality in so many cultures, including ours, it can be a real struggle and evoke shame. So that, when you say it's at the very beginning of the book, doesn't exactly start the book. There's a prologue that's set in India, and then there's Wendy, who receives the diary from whom, or she thinks it's a diary, she's not quite sure, from a woman on a train, an elderly woman, it turns out to be, who says she's a Devadasi. So it starts on that train ride, and she has some flashbacks during that train ride to some pivotal moments that contributed to the breakdown of her marriage. And she's just recently divorced, and on that train ride, she's sort of going on a spiritual pilgrimage. So it's a flashback, and it's woven into that train ride. And yeah, I mean, I originally actually had it chronologically in the story. And yet I felt, I just wanted to dive into the issues of sacred sexuality, the patriarchy, repression, and shame that arises out of that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and thank you for courageously weaving it in through so many threads, because there's even the thread of her, trying to get with her own teacher who kind of rejected her, and she was, going back to see if there's a way to make peace at this last point. So there's all these layers of different relationships that do put things into question. And I think that was another, I had one of my questions was like, is there a very specific mission that you had as a writer? Because as a reader, I was faced with having to almost say, wow, what do I think about that? What is my opinion about that? Is that right or wrong? Or the idea of right conduct?
Well, okay, I did have a mission, but it wasn't really, first of all, I never start anything that is about an idea. I mean, I had to learn what the book was about. It's really character driven. So the characters tell me their stories. And if the characters come alive on the page, then they tell me their stories. Now, Wendy, who gave up her art, her fine art, because she felt that she wasn't a good enough mother, because she was so absorbed in her creation of art, goes back, gets a degree in clinical social work, and she makes mistakes in her life, some pretty serious mistakes, and in poor judgment. And they're not my mistakes. I mean, because we mine the material of our psyches when we write fiction. So Wendy isn't me. I'm not a clinical social worker. I'm not a fine artist. I did go through a divorce many years ago, but Wendy's mistakes aren't my mistakes, but I made serious mistakes in judgment in my life. And in doing so, what Wendy's mistakes, I can mine the psycho-emotional aspects of my own mistakes by letting Wendy make her mistakes, if that makes sense. So first of all, I'm going to get back to your question, because I did have a mission in getting the story told, but it wasn't idea driven. The ideas, it's like, oh, wow, this is what I wrote. It was character driven. But there was, and maybe you were going to ask another question about this, but when I was in India in the early 90s, I there were several events that just, first of all, I had been meditating and doing yoga for 2 months, so I was completely open and receptive. And I had a couple of incidents occur in which I was like, it struck me very deeply. One of them was standing in the office of a woman named Lakshmi, that's whose her writing name is I'm dropping her. Anyway, her real name is Lakshmi, and she wrote a novel or novella called The Purple Sea. I got together with her because I loved the novel. I'd read it the year before when I was in India, and she's an Indian feminist. And she and some women had published a calendar to let the world know about these Karnataka beady rollers who were dying of lung cancer, and some of them became dedicated to the goddess Yalama. And Devadasis, which had this rich cultural heritage. I'm looking for a picture in here. David, in this calendar, which I have, a 1982 calendar.
That's so
yeah, the Devadasis were sacred temple dancers, well educated and honored, married to the divine. And when they were banned in 1947, they went underground basically, and poor families would dedicate their daughters to the goddess Yalama at a very early age. And when they reached puberty, they were then often sex workers. They were to support the family. So this picture, I don't know, of Rohini, I think she was 8. No, she's 6 in this picture. She had knotted hair, which was one of the signs of being that you should be dedicated to the goddess Yalama. This is still going on, by the way, dedications. So that picture, I saw that is one of those things where I was so open and tears just coursed down my face. And at that time, I didn't know anything about the Devadasis. So I went home, and it wasn't that I immediately researched them. I may have done a little bit of research, so I knew that the Devadasis had once been sacred temple dancers and were honored, and Bharatanatyam, the classical Indian dance, comes from what they did. It's a sanitized version of their dance. So I knew a little bit, but I wasn't expecting to write. And then this voice started coming through me of this. The voice was Saraswati, and she was 8 years old, not 6. And she was a poor girl. Her mother had died, and she was adopted by a Devadasi in the years when Devadasis were still honorable, maybe not chaste, but honorable women in the community, auspicious. They led temple rituals and that sort of thing. So her voice just came through me. It was I had never, because I had been as a depressed fiction writer, I shouldn't say depressed, I was carrying a lot of depression in my body mind for many years and writing fiction. I had never had an experience like this where the voice came through me. And I was staying, I went for part of the time, I was down in Sarasota, Longboat Key, where my parents spent the winter, and I was with them. And I would read whatever came through me to my father. And he had been so critical of my writing, I have to say. He was always like very judgmental of my writing, because he had a degree in journalism from Columbia, and he was astounded. He loved the story. So it was this sort of family connection too, because here came Saraswati's voice, and it really reconnected me in a deeper way with my father. So I have just so much fondness for her. And not only, then I was trying to write an American frame, and I did one version at that time. It took me about a year to write. It just wasn't right.
Mhm.
Saraswati's story, that the temple dancer part, which is about half the novel, has not been changed. The only thing that's been added to was that after her voice came through, I went to Wesleyan University, which is the center, the largest world music library in the country, maybe in the world, I'm not sure. But there was a large collection of master's theses and dissertations, and I could read about the Devadasi and its tradition. So I could authenticate
Mhm.
some of the rituals and do more research. And then I, met, Kay Porcine, who was teaching there, who had studied in India with Bala Saraswati, the most famous Devadasi, who taught and performed worldwide, and got to see videos of Devadasi's,
Amazing.
old videos. So yeah, so I did a lot of research after the voice came through.
Okay. Yeah, and that
It's
was,
been
yeah,
26 years ago.
I was
Yeah,
gonna say this didn't happen in a couple of years. It's
no,
been
it was 26 years ago that her voice came through. And then I wrote 3 different American frames around it. And when I handed the reins of Life Force Yoga Healing Institute to Rose Kress, so I no longer direct the trainings or anything like that, it gave me more time to write. And so from 2016 to 2019, basically, I wrote Wendy's story.
Mhm.
And that one is the one that's in the current temple dancer.
Yes. Yeah. And really she has her own complexity of life and and family and her daughter, and I mean, it was pretty incredible. Such a complex story was so riveting. Uh,
Mm,
that's pretty
thank you.
masterful. So thank you. No, that was pretty masterful. And that was one of my questions was the Saraswati voice. And for maybe those that aren't familiar with Saraswati, maybe you can just kind of share a little bit of that energy.
Sure. Here, I have a Saraswati right here. So she is the goddess of wisdom, music, art. And, in India, and families often name their children for gods and goddesses. And so her mother says, I named your sister Lakshmi so that she would have abundance of, and feel secure, safe. And I named you Saraswati so you would go to school and learn to read and write. And so Saraswati grows up to become a temple dancer, and she's very smart. But the Saraswati energy is very much about creativity. And unbeknownst to me, I don't know that if you know this, Maryam, but when I was given my first mantra way back in 1971, I believe, through the TM movement, I got a mantra, and we're not supposed to share it, not say it out loud, keep it to yourself. And then I read Russell Paul's book, The Yoga of Sound, and then I had a chance to talk to him because we were both presenting at Kripalu and at other places. And turns out it right there was my mantra. And it was Saraswati's mantra.
Oh, wow.
So
That just gave me shivers.
for 40 years, I was using, I also use another mantra, but I used that seed sound that was Saraswati's mantra.
Mhm.
And I mean, now that Krishna Das has a Saraswati mantra.
Mhm.
Several do, but the seed sound,
Yeah.
not the whole. So
Yeah. The
anyway,
potent.
that's
It's like the essential oil.
yes,
Just,
yes. And then who knew? I didn't when I wrote the book. I didn't know it was, I had been using Saraswati's mantra for meditation for all these years,
Mhm.
and it certainly, I think, influenced my character and what I sought in the world, which was, wisdom, compassion, creativity, art, flow, all the things she represents.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually a good segue. This, I'll open up after this, so have your kind of questions ready. But the segue to creativity and these tools that we have in yoga, and even how you spoke to the openness that is cultivated in us, and the ability to kind of look at life through different lenses. And we had talked
Yeah,
about I published a book last year, and
right here.
yes, there it is. And then it is poetry, and then there's drawings in there. And I know it came out of the fact that I have been spending time with myself and contemplating big questions.
Mhm.
Path of yoga is to be with ourselves, but also to ask questions about this world and life. And I loved hearing that you have a on-demand writing course. But I'd love to kind of reflect a little bit with you of yoga and its tools and creativity and expression. And
And by the way, this is a lovely book if you haven't read it, and I suspect most of you have, but it does have, when you read it, you read the poetry, you feel the flow of it, and you know that it came from a place of an open heart, open mind, and a meditative place. Like I would imagine a lot of it was written after coming off the yoga mat or the cushion. Yeah. So that speaks to what we're talking about. I think that if we are painters or writers or whatever our form of art may be, if we choose to be or creative with our landscape, our gardening. I'm thinking of Carrie. I'm thinking of Heather with her painting, and Maryam with her art as well. And I'm sure many of you are artistic, but even cooking. If we bring that creative energy to it, the thing that what yoga can do is open us to be more receptive to what Jung would call the collective unconscious, that we are opening we're opening the channels, because it's art is not, I mean, we need the left brain, we need that cognitive, we need the whole prefrontal cortex to guide us through the whatever project we're working on. But we also want that juicy part of receptivity to what's out there. I mean, even Einstein, I don't have the quote on the top of my head, but he talks about connecting to the universe of ideas. And whether you're a creative scientist or creative coach, business coach, it's connecting to something beyond the small self, the ahankara, to the greater self with a capital S. And that is where I think a story comes from a writing perspective. If it's so the course that I developed has just went online like last week. It's an on-demand course, so there are like 16 lessons. So it's got creative prompts, and then then writing exercises to help develop, whether it's memoir, to help discover deeper levels of character, scene, narrative voice, time sequencing and point of view. So there are exercises that you can do. So yeah, that to me, I think yoga has helped me open the channel to be more receptive to story.
Yeah, agreed. And to tie it back to Devadasis, and just I have such a love for them now because of the historical and the wisdom that you shared, but also I mean I have etched in my memory the devotion in which she would dance for Shiva, like that kind of that idea of um, like you said, there's something larger that is served
Mhm,
in creativity and expression.
mhm,
And when you hear of the Devadasi and you kind of hear the story that we can say lots of things, okay, temple dance was what they did, they were sex workers, but then when you get into what is the feeling of the expression of the dance, and that she was just in love with
mhm,
the beloved,
mhm, mhm.
and this is her expression, it just transformed my perspective on
Mhm.
Devadasi. So
Yeah. And it seems, historically, they were not concubines. They were of, the Maharaja or the temple priest. And then little by little, that part of it, like geishas,
mhm,
that part was included. And then because they were outlawed after thousands of years of temple devotion, and as you say, that expression, that trance of being with the beloved, being with God, and through the dance and through chanting, and was her way, her channel to the divine, and uh, and then little by little, the Devadasi tradition was decimated, and uh, and so now it's just basically, those who are dedicated do temple ritual. And I've read conflicting articles, contemporary articles, that they've gotten a bad rap, that not all women who are dedicated as Devadasi are actually put into some kind of sex trade.
mhm.
It's not the case.
Right,
That
organizations, yeah,
mhm.
yeah. Yeah, wonderful. Well, I want to open up for questions. I have a few more, but let's hear from some of you that have read, and I welcome you to just share. I think it's really beautiful for an author to hear how her book has landed and with you. And so, if you don't have a question, you just want to share, please share. You can raise your hand and mute. Go ahead. Yana. Hi.
Hi, Amy.
Yana.
I like the story of Wendy. I think it's very real story and very relatable story. But I found myself having anger feelings when we talk about Devadasis.
Hmm.
And, I was thinking a lot about, we talking about, all of this commune with divine and dancing expressions and all this lofty kind of spiritual things. What I was thinking, well, this is just a guise for cultural kind of legitimization of prostitution. It's kind of, and at one point Wendy says, oh my God, when she reads about Saraswati, is she being trafficked? And I was like, yeah, Wendy, that's right. And it's kind of,
Mhm.
I understand, that Devadasis, they achieved better economical status. They had more freedoms than, otherwise they're women in, and
Mhm.
of this case to other case, in India would have. But, I was like thinking, is the author really romanticizing this idea of, of Devadasis, kind of, I was thinking to myself, well, it's great that they outlawed it in 1947, and thinking, well, probably they're the first oldest profession, went just more on the ground, right? And no economic benefits that were accruing to them, and freedoms, and all of these things, no longer there. But I just felt so much anger, reading about priming the pre-puberty girl for the life of this, sex worker. It's just like, I was thinking, am I projecting my sensibilities, of today on the culture of this? And at the end of the day, I was saying, I'll take the sanitized dance, classical Indian dance, over, 13-year-old, 12-year-old being primed for their, for this type of, sexual
So
slavery.
if I could, can I address, Yana? I totally understand your point of view, and I share much of that, because in our contemporary world, when we look at 13, 14, 15-year-olds, we want to protect them. And, we don't want to see them in any kind, in harm's way. And what I think it helps to understand the context of where these of women in India. For one thing, at that time, and still in remote villages, a woman is sold. There's the dowry system. She is a servant in her mother-in-law's home. She has no freedom, and she has no ability to accrue, she can't inherit. So there's, in villages, it's changed in the modern globalization world. And, I have many Indian friends who, to tell you the truth, the way out for a woman of that kind of arranged marriage, which is still happening, is education, get your PhD or serve a guru. Those are the two routes out of the traditional, so you would be, at an ashram serving a guru. So the Devadasis represented at that time another choice. It wasn't really a choice, but another option. It's so women in general in India and in other cultures were, you can't call it sex trafficked, but these girls were married to older men as soon as they reached puberty, and to much older men. And they were, the families, there were, I think, 8,000 bride burnings. This doesn't happen in necessarily the cities, but last year, that those bride burnings in India are the result of people, of the mother-in-law and the family feeling that A, she's not producing a male heir, B, the dowry was insufficient and so they go back to those families for more demands, more dowry demands. And when those demands aren't met, there can be acid, burning the face, and there can be actual literal murder. So, whoa, that's a big subject. And I feel your anger and I understand it and I share it, but it's bigger than just the Devadasis. So that's yeah. I hope that answers your question. So
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there someone else with a question? I saw someone's mic go on earlier.
Yeah.
Or chat.
Jamila, is your hand going up? Go for it.
I almost didn't. Sorry. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. I am going to read it a second time to really soak it in. I found there were like two sides of it when I read it. There, it was like, I found it sensual but brutal at the same time. I found it uplifting on one side and depressing on another side, fictional on one side, but like real life, on another side. So for me, it was like, it was always these two sides of it. There was a lot of violence, but there was a lot of art, artistic and beauty in it. So all I have to say is that thank you. I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm going to read it again.
Thank you,
Just-
Jamalee. As you're saying that, it's like, oh, yeah. I mean, I'm hearing it and it's like, oh, yeah. Well, my tradition is Advaita Vedanta, non-dual. And also working with difficult emotions, challenging emotions, both as someone who came through um, major depression and medication and therapy and all of that, but also as someone who through yoga, found more balance. But of course I was drawn to Advaita Vedanta, which doesn't push anything away, which doesn't deny anything, which allows for the dark and the light together,
Exactly.
and to step back into a larger perspective where the dark and the light, I guess I should look based on the light, I should say the dark and the light don't hijack us. We're able to move through those dark places to find the light. So that's my perspective. I wasn't thinking about that. Did I think about that when I wrote the novel? No. But I think it's sort of who I am. I can tell you that a dear friend in India, we are really good friends and we talk on Zoom and we email almost daily, is writing some short stories that she's thinking about, tales from the ashram kind of thing. And she's lived in various ashrams and is living in a secular life right now. And so I said, oh, that's interesting. Feel free to send me something, So she sent me an outline and she said she's working on making sure they're cheery and uplifting. And then I thought, and then her next email was, do you want to collaborate? Do you want to write these with me? And, and it was like, I love her. And I love the idea of tales from the ashram, but that would not be my perspective, cheery and uplifting. It would be moments of uplift and transcendence and moments of the dark side. We know those stories from not all, but from the gurus who've who've transcended their emotions and transcended the work on their emotions and have acted out of their emotional body and are maybe living in their bliss body, but they're acting inappropriately. So we all know those stories, and for sure I've experienced some aspects of that. So my tales from the ashram would be very different than her cheery, uplifting stories. So, it's just who I am, that something would be, Jamalee, that would affect you that way, that there would be moments of, uplift and moments of depression in the same book. That makes total sense to me, knowing who I am.
Thank you. Reason why I want to read it again. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful comment. Let's see, what else to share? Beautiful. Go for it. Nora. Hi, Nora.
Hi, how are you, Mary?
Good.
Hi, Amy.
Hi,
Do you remember
Nora.
me from this past weekend?
Oh, yes. Hi.
I'd be farther along in your book if I didn't take your workshop, but I'm glad I'm doing both. I just wanted to tell you, I really like the way you presented the characters and the transitions from one to another. Sometimes when you read stories of two different people or multiple people from different, perspectives and all, you get confused. And I think you did a beautiful job of being able to, keep the story straight and not get the reader confused, time-wise or character-wise. And I found the characters to be very relatable. I don't have that much in common, but there's enough and they're real.
Mhm.
And I'm finding it a nice, easy read. I haven't finished it yet. I plan to finish it tonight.
Thank you.
But
So
nice job.
wonderful to see
Thank
you
you.
again.
Yeah,
And yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, that's always a tricky thing, making those transitions.
you did a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joelle, hello.
Hi, Amy. I'm Joelle, and
Hi, Joelle.
hi all. I have two questions. I think there needs to be a novel written about the light and the dark in the ashrams.
Mm.
There's a lot I have read a lot, and I have not read a novel. I'm not advocating a documentary or there are plenty of factual stories, but I just want to urge you to think about that, because you are one of the people that could write a novel from a real perspective. And I think that would be
You
so
know,
incredibly valuable.
Thank you, Joelle. That's something to consider. I just saw on Facebook, I should have written it down and I should have ordered it right away. A woman who was living at Kripalu for some time just published a novel about exactly what you're talking about. She calls it a novel, and it's not memoir, but it's set at an ashram, and it's the guru, whatever you want to call it, acts out, and everything blows up. So so there may be a novel out there. I haven't read it, so I don't know how good it is or what it's like, but yeah, I should have ordered it right away and I didn't. But I think you're making me want to go look it up and read it to see, because yeah, that's I've been hurt by big stick teachers. My Advaita Vedanta teacher in India. I mean, Wendy's experience was fictionalized, but I had a similar heartbreak with a guru in India, big stick teacher who just sort of pulled me in and then rejected me. So, and it was devastating.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to encourage you to put this seed in your mind because you have a different perspective.
Yeah.
Kripalu has gone through its own quite a while ago.
Mhm.
It long time ago went through some of its own
Mhm.
struggles, but they dealt with it very well, I think. But
Mhm.
the other thing was I read a book that has some of the same energy as your book does, called The Henna Artist by Alka Joshi.
Yeah, I haven't read it, and I tried not to. I want to read it, but I tried not to because I didn't want to be influenced by it, because she's, hers is quite well known and she's quite famous. So, but tell me about it. Tell me what you think.
I think you would enjoy it, and I think
Yeah.
it would enrich the thinking that, and we continue. Don't you continue to think about your novels? I mean, once you've written them, you step away, but they're living. They're
Yes.
alive in all of us. It's a
Yeah.
cool thing about it. And so anyway, the henna artist, from the perspective of a woman who wanted to escape what you described in certain Indian culture, especially, not, I don't know, especially, I have friends that are from India who have educated me on their experiences. But the idea of the henna artist, like you were saying, is escaping a lifestyle where women are subservient. If they're married, they're subservient to their husbands completely, and they're subservient to their mother-in-law completely. And how does one escape that? And for the people who are poor, it's really hard to get a PhD unless you
That's right.
have an avenue or a sponsor or a network, something. There has to be some gift that comes your way. So the henna artist is about a woman from a poor family and an abusive husband. Ironically, it turns out that her mother-in-law was a gift who taught her a skill that allowed her to escape. And she took that skill and escaped as a henna artist. And so, but that theme that you were describing of she wanted freedom. And so it's a book about her journey. And it's a novel, as you know. And so I have your book at hand right on my desk, but I wanted to hear you speak about it first before I read it. So now I will read it. And
Thank
you
you.
for sharing your thoughts.
Yeah. And I look forward. Thank you for that little synopsis of the henna artist, because it's something I do want to read. I just didn't want to be too influenced or feel inadequate. So I just
an issue for anybody. It's just a different perspective. But from everything I've read, I read the prologue of your book, and it is certainly has a lot in it, and everybody who reads it is going to think of their own experiences, like we do in all novels, and their own. But the other side of it is that in India, I'm a big fan of Indian theater, which women, not what you're talking about, not. I'm talking about theater where the rasas, which of emotion, are expressed, and in a very honorable way in the theater, and there's got to be, I'm sure, some of that in your book as well. So from your perspective. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for writing it. And the name alone, I bought it before I even knew any. I think I pre-ordered it because the name was wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoy it, Joelle.
I will. Thank you for being here and sharing.
Thank you, Joelle.
Hi, Heather.
Here.
Hi, Heather.
Hi. Go ahead. Do you have a question, comment?
I think you're.
Oh, we can't hear you. You have to pick it from your sound.
Yes, go to sound preferences and hit.
Now, right?
Now we can.
Yeah.
Okay. I find when I put this on the middle of it, I can't talk, but I can hear. Okay. So anyway, Amy, good to see you. Last time I think I saw you was in Cape Cod.
Yeah.
And that was wonderful to spend that time there. Mine's just a quick question because I know we're getting to the end of the night. I really love listening to books on audio, and I think that I may have seen you talk about that somewhere on a Facebook thing. Is that happening soon?
It is. I have the most wonderful actress in Utah. She went to Northwestern, studied theater, and she is a book narrator. And when you hire a book narrator, you get to audition numbers of voices. And I was primarily looking for an Indian woman, but the Indian, I couldn't hire two different voices. And this actress is brilliant. She's every Sanskrit word. She has a Indian friend coach who's giving her information. She looks it up online. She's got a nice Indian accent, and yes, so it's going to be done. She'll be done by February 24th. And I don't know, we don't have any kind of marketing plan. I don't know how to get it up on Audible, but it will happen probably in March. There'll be an audiobook.
Excellent. I love listening to books on tape and walking in the woods. It's just
Mm.
the perfect
And
fit.
her name is Daisy Fair. I love the
I love
name.
that.
Yeah.
That's cool. Great. Thank you.
Thanks for asking, Heather.
How about a movie? Any movies coming out on this? Just
Well,
Well, yeah, exactly.
through
Well,
our yoga connection, there is a woman who's a member of IAYT, International Association of Yoga Therapists, who is an actress and producer in Hollywood. And I didn't know her, but my friend Amy Wheeler, my friend Lee Blaschke are good friends of hers. And they said, well, why don't you just, ask her if she's interested. She is. So she actually she has a partnership with someone who's that produced, she's been mostly an actress and director. She was in the Milagro Bean Wars. So she's working with a producer who produced Bonnie and Clyde. I mean, he's got tons of credits. So she's in the middle of it right now, and she just asked me for an extension. Would I mind if she took a little longer, because she's on the board of the Academy Awards, and she's doing international film review. She's got to watch 3 films a day for the next until the Academy. I don't know until when, but so she asked for an extension. It's like, there's nobody else. Like, you're not in competition with anybody. I don't have an agent trying to sell it elsewhere. So we can all put a little energy into that idea. That would certainly be wonderful. I think to me, Saraswati spoke through me. I felt the mission, and this goes back to your question earlier, Maryam, that I had some kind of dharmic duty to see her story told. And it took me 26 years. And she says to Wendy, you need to paint us.
Mm-hmm.
So what better canvas than the big screen?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would ultimately make Saraswati happy.
Yes.
So that's a possibility. I mean, there's many steps, and I have friends who've written novels who've had film options for films, and they made a little bit of money here and there, but they never happened. So there are lots of reasons why it can't be done, or it might not be done, but there's also the hope that it might. So
yeah, I completely see it. I will put it out for you, because I just think it's got so many layers of investigation as society, as culture, as expression, so many very important layers to contemplate. So from it being a really beautiful story, the inquiry is not easy that it asks of us. And I think we need more movies like that in this world. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to respect time a little bit. It's 9 o'clock. We're going to 9:15, and wanted to give a little space for questions. And also, I don't know if Amy, if you wanted to do a closing or anything of kind of inviting this Saraswati energy to be present. And I want to just share, I don't think what you're, hearing you say about, to a certain extent, this idea of channeling or letting the voice come through. I don't I don't hear all writers say that. It's not
Mhm.
something that writers say.
Yeah. I would say that I have written other novels that are unpublished. And although I really want the character, once I have, my mind has created the character, I want the character to come alive on the page and show me where it's going and what it needs, and all of that, and direct the show basically. But this was different from that. It was not just creating a full character. That character was fully realized, and I've never had an experience before or since in which the voice felt like it came through me, that it was a gift. And I thought to myself, well, maybe it's just a gift. Maybe she just needed to share it with me. That was her way of closure. And I told myself that for years when I couldn't get, my previous versions were not published. I had a feminist press want to do it a few, maybe 15 years ago with another frame. And I didn't really resonate with the press. So I didn't go with them. And so it's, this novel felt like, I feel like I finally fulfilled part of my dharma in my debt to her, because it really did feel like it came through me. So, some of the difficult, challenging things that Yana brought up, and, that others have felt, it was like, who am I to question? This is her life. This is what's happening. So it really felt like it was received. And, yeah, I'm a little woo-woo. I teach yoga for mental health, but I wouldn't say that about any. I wrote Broken Strings. I've written a number of novels. I've had short stories published that were well published, but my other novels haven't been published, and they're character driven, but they're not character received.
That's a beautiful distinction. Yeah. There any thoughts, questions, anyone? Curiosities? It's such a treat to have an author. I just love it. Sometimes we have book clubs, right? And we're talking about the book, but we get to talk about it with the writer. Such a great opportunity, Larry.
So thank you, Amy. I do have a curiosity, which is that the book really grabbed me and took me, just on this incredible journey. But what I wanted to know, what was the inspiration for the scene in the railroad car where the dancer gives her memoir to this younger woman? What was there an inspiration specific to that?
Well, my experiences in India were on a lot of trains, because I traveled all around, and each time I went to India, and I've been in all kinds of situations on those trains. So a lot of that just came from my own experience of traveling, going to see going to see someone I considered a guru who had rejected me. So that all was that part on the scene, and I needed a vehicle for Saraswati's story. So was it a character? One of the previous versions was that a woman in America, in Rhode Island, was started having flashbacks to a past life, and she was also a dancer. So she had been with Twyla Tharp, and she was on tour, and that kind of thing. So, but that, and then there was another version set in Sedona, with very woo woo, and so I just, I went with. Wendy just felt really real to me, and Yogaville is a real place. Well, you all know Yogaville because most of you live nearby, and I love Yogaville. I love going on retreat. I miss it so much. I miss diving deep into retreat and having a structure like that. So I included Yogaville in this story, and how many of you miss that retreat, going on retreat? Not necessarily Yogaville, but anywhere. It's like, oh my gosh, when are we going to be able to have community, silence, and structured meditations, and just have our food prepared for us, healthy vegetarian food, and oh my gosh. Soon as we're all vaccinated and travel's okay, I'm headed straight to Yogaville.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but
You did.
I riffed on it anyway. So it looks like we're close to being finished. So maybe I can, think about maybe allow the eyes to soften or close. And what does the idea of Saraswati, that deep goddess river of wisdom and creativity and music and art, allow her, and just allow it to breathe through you. Let's create a channel. If you wish, you can raise your arms or cactus arms and breathe in that energy of deep connection to the wisdom of the universe, deep connection to the flow of art and creativity. Breathe it deeply. Inhale to your crown, I am. Exhale to your seat here. Grounded in that. And let's take Eagle Mudra, Garuda Mudra again, as we started. And maybe there's a seed of something you want to cultivate richly in the heart: compassion, acceptance, self-acceptance, honoring your own authenticity, your own creativity. And let's chant Yam, long Y and the long sound. Give your heart a little rock, a compassionate rock. Palms in prayer. Namaste, everyone. Thank you so much for your attention. It's been really fun. Thank you, Maryam. It's been so nice to be with you in your community.